Welcome to the USU Career Studio podcast that helps you navigate your career path. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to tell your friends and family all about it. Subscribe to our podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere else you listen to get access to our newest content. Thanks for joining us for our Friday face-to-face bonus episode. I'm Marissa Armistead, your host, and I'm excited to welcome alum and senior electrical engineer Sixto Cabrera to the show. Welcome, Sixto.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So excited to chat with you this month. We're diving into the College of Engineering and really looking at some potential career paths that we might consider related to that. So Sixto, I'd love to start our conversation today by having you walk us through your educational timeline and how that all led to Vivint.
Yeah. So, I was born and raised in the Dominican Republic. And when it came time for me to come to college, I applied to a scholarship program that my country, the Dominican Republic, has with several universities in the U.S., and among them is Utah State. And the year that I applied, they only had Utah State available. And so I applied to the program and I got admitted to the program. And then after that, I started my journey to study electrical engineering. And then Utah State, I received both my bachelor's and master's degree in electrical engineering, and I graduated in 2015.
Wow, very cool. Do you mind me asking a couple questions? I'm super curious. What was that transition like from the Dominican Republic to the United States? I don't know. What was that like coming to college here?
It's quite interesting transition because there are different layers. You can look at it. You can look at it from the cultural perspective, the language barrier to and also the expectations are different. I think coming to the U.S., you had to make the adjustment to all the different aspects. But I thought overall that the transition was smooth for me because I had a great community that supported me through the transition process, especially Utah State. They have the International Student Office, and they made sure that you feel kind of like at home initially, although you're not home. But I think they definitely ease the transition over and they make it simpler for you.
Good. Oh, well, I'm so glad you felt supported in that. And I'm so excited that we get to chat today. When students hear the word engineer, there's so many different avenues that they could go with engineering. And so today I'd love to dive deeper into electrical engineering. So maybe to start, would you mind just giving us like a really brief overview of what does an electrical engineer do? And maybe give us a little bit of a day in the life.
Okay. So, electrical engineering, it's hard to give like a blanket definition because there's so many disciplines are involved with electrical engineering. And then when I think about electrical engineering, I think a lot of people think about their power outlet they have at home and they can plug in their equipment. But electrical engineering is much more than that. You think about electronics, telecommunications, artificial intelligence. You can think of anything really wireless. All those things have to do with electronics, even your smartphone. So it's really broad, but I think it's just an exciting field that you have so many different things you can try. And it's hard for someone who studies electrical engineering not to find something they really like because there's so many options you have available to you. In my particular case, I specialize in electronics engineering. So I design electronic circuits. You can think of smart home appliances, things of that nature. And the day typically for me, I could be one day doing some design work on the computer, but a lot of that becomes hands-on because once you get prototypes in, you need to do a lot of testing to validate the design actually is going to comply because there are a lot of details, but in a nutshell, you have to make sure that your design is going to be compliant in terms of performance and also regulatory standards, which regulate the consumer electronic domain.
Super interesting. And I hope I'm not getting too in the weeds here, but I am curious. So electrical engineer versus maybe like a UX designer, like, is there any crossover? Are there similarities? Are they totally different?
There's some crossover, I'd say, because, when you think about an electrical engineer, I know personally a lot of electrical engineers that they move on to do programming because the curriculum is so deep into programming that you have enough background that it may take you some time to get used to it, to get up to speed in terms of the skills. But in the end, you have enough background to actually do that. So I can see where there's overlap. And today, really, anyone who's getting a degree in engineering, you can be mechanical, you can be civil, you can be electrical, you can be computer engineering. It overlaps so much that the line is blurred. You don't know where the distinction is anymore, I think, these days.
Yeah, yeah, that's so interesting. Well, and I'm curious, so for you, how did you kind of work to find your own niche? Like, how did you find your own path to kind of the tech side of it?
Well, it goes back to my time back home. When I went to high school, I actually attended a technical high school. So
Okay.
I had to pick a focus area. And at the time, I had like, I believe, five choices. It was electricity, electronics, agriculture, mechanical, and I may be forgetting some of them, but
Sure.
but then I picked electronics at the time, just because I was as a teenager. I was like, this seems cool. I picked it, and actually worked out for me because I ended up finding something I really liked and I really enjoyed it back then. So my decision when it came time for college, it was really simple. I already knew what I wanted to do. So from the first day on campus, I knew I wanted to do electrical engineering. So that was an easy decision for me.
That's so interesting. And I'm curious, so coming to the United States, was that like a little bit of shell shock? Were you surprised when maybe some of your former like peers or whatever maybe said, I don't know exactly what I want to do, like career-wise? Was that odd to you?
Yeah, actually, yes. Because I met a lot of people that it maybe takes them a year, or a year and a
Uh-huh.
half before they decide what they want to do. But at the same time, I understand because they were not exposed to anything maybe in high school that they will point them, oh, I want to be a biological engineer, or I want to be an
Sure.
electrical engineer. So for me, since I already have been exposed to electrical engineering before, it was an easy decision for me. But I can understand why someone going into college for the first time doesn't know necessarily what they want to do. I think a lot of people are in the same situation, and so I can see that being just normal part of college.
Yeah, so interesting, interesting. So I would love to chat a little bit more about your current job with Vivint, and I know we were just chatting off air about how you're somewhat new to the position, but I'd love to hear actually from that kind of newer, fresh perspective. What are some of like the large, where are you spending your time in the job? Like, give me some of kind of the buckets of your work.
Yeah. So actually, right now I'm working on projects doing electrical design, electronics design. So I designed the circuits for example, to give you a specific example, like cameras and lighting
Oh, wow.
for smart home applications. So I'm designing those things, and at the same time, I'm supporting the test that goes on to validate that the design is going to work. So that's kind of my role right now. What I'm doing today, it's more like since it's a senior level position, I'm expected to actually give out recommendations for improvement. I'm also expected to work with some of the partners that we have to make sure that they align with what we want. And
Yeah.
so it's that's kind of high level what I've been doing up to this point.
Very, very cool. And I'd love to hear maybe a little bit from some of your previous engineering experience to kind of this more leadership or management role that you have now. What are some of the skills that were required for both?
I think for electrical engineering, besides the technical skills, I think you have to have attention to detail. You
Mm.
gotta have critical thinking. You have to be able to process a lot of data really fast and understand how things fit together. Because when in engineering, especially electrical, you have different systems and you create them on their own. But at some point, they have to interface together. And it's how you can combine them together without breaking one or the other, or maybe breaking both. So it's really just thinking fast, and also from a technical perspective, I think anyone going through a college curriculum right now, I would say you have to really focus on your core classes because they come back. I mean, once you're in the field, they come back. You have to go back to the basics. A lot of times you have to go back to the drawing board and and kind of reset because since things are moving so fast, I think you lose track of the basics, and
Mhm.
the basics always work. So you have to go back to them. So that would be the skill sets that I would think. would definitely benefit someone.
So interesting. And I would love to dive a little bit deeper, maybe to the technical skill side of it too. I'm curious, number one, does the technical requirements of this job, are they constantly changing, or have you seen a couple of solid technical skills that have kind of remained regardless? I don't know. What are your thoughts on technical skills?
You know what? I think that's a good question. That's a very good question. I think the tools change, but the core requirements are the same. So for example, if you're an electrical engineer, my expectation is someone that wants to hire you, they're looking for someone who knows circuit design, knows how to use lab equipment, knows how to process data. But the tools around those skills, they've changed. They're better tools now. They're more advanced. But still the base requirement, I think, is still the same. There's always new technology trends that you have to try and keep up with. But in general, it's still the same core requirements. And specifically for an electrical engineer, would be like circuit design, lab equipment, like I mentioned. And also, I would say these days, you have to have enough background in programming to be able to, because all the software, I mean, you have to program at some point or another.
Yeah. That's a great overview of skill sets to be thinking about. I would love to hear from your perspective, what are the activities or parts of your job where you are just enjoying it so much you lose track of time and you could just do it for fun?
The challenge, I think the challenge when you have a problem that it's hard to solve and it's puzzling, I think, and I try not to do this too much, but I think you go home and you're still thinking about it because those are problems that they don't stay home. I mean, it's something in your brain and you try to process it. And especially because you spend maybe hours or weeks trying to debug one particular problem. And I think the challenge is what drives most engineers that I met is really how you solve this problem in the most efficient way, in the better way. And it's a trade-off between decisions. And that's what drives me to do engineering.
I love that. And that makes me want to ask a follow-up question about how do you set boundaries between work and maybe, the rest of your life, all of the other fun things that you do, especially, I don't know if your position is partially or completely remote at all, but I am curious, especially maybe even during the pandemic, how did you set those boundaries of you want to think about work, but also you have other life priorities?
Yeah, if you don't have anything else besides work, I think the boundaries are not clear because you can work and you say, well, I don't have anything else to do. So you will probably continue on doing some other stuff. I think the boundaries you set them when you do something besides work. Let's say if you find something you like I don't know, coaching a team, if you like exercising, if you like hiking. So you have to bring in all those other aspects to your life to make it more rounded. And that way you're going to have boundaries. That's the way I would approach that.
Definitely. No, I think that's a great insight. Okay, I would love to learn a little bit more about your work with Vivint, specifically, coming into this job or this company. What was something you totally weren't expecting, but you were really kind of surprised, like happily surprised that they offered or was a part of the job? Anything coming to mind?
Yeah, so the first thing that comes to mind is, my previous job before this one, it was a smaller company, a great group of people. I actually learned a lot because since it was a smaller company, you get to wear multiple hats. It's more hands-on. It's more, you're expected to do more. But here at Vivint, when I came in here, since it's a larger company, a lot of the processes are already in place. And you have to focus more on your skill. Not necessarily you have to worry about all the things that you had to do before. But the pleasant surprise for me was here interacting with different experts in different areas. I'm talking with a mechanical engineer. He's got 20 years of experience doing what he does. I'm working with someone who just does embedded engineering, and I'm interacting with these people and I'm learning as much as I can. So that was really pleasant because usually engineering, a lot of people think of them as you in a corner and you're doing the job on your own. But there's a lot of interaction that goes on, especially as you try to launch products to the market. And a lot of people are going to have their input to the process, and you have to take all them into account to make sure your design is going to be compliant.
Absolutely. That's a great example. I love that. I would love to also hear, when you are thinking about maybe other roles. So we were talking a lot about electrical engineering, but if you were maybe talking to a friend who said, I'm kind of interested in engineering, but maybe electrical is not quite the niche I want to go into, what are some other jobs that you interact with a lot that maybe you would say, hey, you might be interested in fill in the blank? What are some other jobs?
I think, and I'm speaking from an engineering perspective. From engineering perspective, let's say you go in, you're not sure you want to do electrical. I can see where you want to do computer engineering, which is kind of like a mix between electrical and programming. So that's like a sweet middle point where if you don't want to be fully an electrical engineer or you don't want to be fully a programmer. I think that's a good middle point. Some people, what I noticed from my experiences, some people are really good at programming. So I would probably tell them, I think maybe you want to look into some of the programming degrees. If you want more like mechanical stuff, because there's a lot of electromechanical systems. So there's definitely a lot of avenues you can go and things you can go to. But that would be my advice to them, is just kind of understand what your strong suits are and probably pursue down that path.
Yeah, I love how you're kind of taking those skills that maybe can be transferable in different spaces and thinking about where those could go. I think that's a great example. I'd love to hear, before we get to our final question, I would love to hear, as you're thinking back across all of the different products you've helped develop and projects you've been a part of, what is a product or a project that comes to mind that felt especially meaningful or is work that you're really proud of?
My previous job, I had a design. It actually was there's some, sentimental attachment to, because it was my first design as an engineer. So I designed a module that actually goes into appliances. And so what it does is the user can automatically control the appliance. Think about of an oven or a fridge or a stove or a dishwasher. Mm-hmm. And so the same module goes in there. And there's a lot of programming that goes there. There was a software team. They actually worked the programming details, but I created the actual circuit, the hardware. And that goes into appliances, and people can control their appliances in a smart home, or you can set your temperature. You can set, if you're baking a cake, whatever you're doing, you can set the right settings for it. So it's quite interesting. And like I said, since it was my first project as an engineer, I learned a lot, and definitely helped me in my career.
What a cool example. And I'm curious, have you ever been like in a friend's home or you're somewhere and you're like, oh, I helped design like a piece of that? Has that ever happened?
Yeah. One day there was an ad on TV for the same appliance, that we worked with, because the appliance, it was a different company. So we just worked with them to make their appliances connected, what we call connected today, which is in a smart home ecosystem.
Wow. And
we saw a TV ad, and I looked at the appliance. I told them, there's something in there, that I created, that I worked on, and my friends were just teasing me. But it was a fun time with my friends. But it definitely makes you feel proud, because you feel you're doing something that it's helping, making people feel more at home. It's more convenient. Because there's benefits, you think about the benefits, you get the functional benefit of what it does, but you also get the emotional benefit of, okay, I feel like, okay, I have everything in place, everything's going to be okay. So I enjoy doing projects that are going to help people feel more like they're in control of their needs.
I love that. And I love that a lot because, oftentimes students come to a career coach and say, I don't know what I want to do, but I want to help people. And I think your example right here shows, in a variety of fields, we can help add value and make life more enjoyable for the people around us in a lot of different ways. And you found that path through electrical engineering. And it could also be in a different path. And so I love that you're highlighting the way in which you're creating meaning or meaningful work. And I just think that's a really cool example. So I appreciate you sharing that. Well, we're just about out of time, but I do want to end with one final question. And that question is, if you were chatting with maybe a junior or maybe a sophomore in college who's still trying to figure out what exactly they want to do with their lives, what piece of advice would you give to them about career development?
I think that my first advice is try and see what you really enjoy doing, and pursue something along those lines. It's hard to, sometimes people don't even know, I think, what they're good at. But I think other people can give you feedback. So you can ask for feedback, because a lot of maybe you don't see it, but I can see, oh, you're really, really good at this, or you're really good at that. So I can point you in the right direction. So that'll be my first advice, is try to understand what you're really good at. And then after that, just pursue it and put it into practice. Because I think in school, all the lessons are really good in terms of the core foundation. And I found that at Utah State. I mean, the core foundations, the professors, everything was really good. But at the same time, you need to put it into practice. You need to go ahead and build it. If you don't build it physically and you see the problems, I think that makes you, gives you more insight, and it's going to help in your career.
Absolutely. And I love that you touched on, not too long ago, I heard somebody explain career kind of exploration this way. They said, you need to find things that you're good at, so like skills that you're good at, and then something that you care about. And then in between, where those two circles, if you think about it like a Venn diagram, in between is that sweet spot of what you're good at and what you care about. And that is really where a lot of people thrive in careers, is when they can hit that sweet spot in between. So I love that you're touching on that idea of finding something you're good at, but also really enjoy. I think that's great. Well, thank you so much, Sixto. Again, I want to thank you for coming on the show, sharing your advice and insights for students who are maybe thinking about pursuing a degree in engineering. And again, just appreciate your thoughts today.
Yeah, thanks for having me anytime.
We hope you loved this episode of the USU Career Studio podcast. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and share this episode with your friends and family.